I think everyone is probably a pro on service dogs by now, because that's what Roxy is. She has different tasks that she's going to be trained to do to become a service dog, and that's for that person, for their PTSD or TBI. And then there's also therapy dogs, and with therapy dogs, that's for other people. So you might see them going around in different hospitals or in different schools. So that is, like, if she was to be a therapy dog, I would go with her into a hospital and help other people with what they might need.
Okay, so people need to know the difference between a service dog and a therapy dog.
And then there's also an emotional support animal. She's like, where are all the keys?
Can you explain the difference with an emotional support dog?
Yes, so that's also for that specific person as well. They just don't go as in-depth with training, so they don't have the same rights as a service dog. So they can't go into places like a service dog can.
How I use my dogs help me overcome issues with autism.
But those with classic autism are not immune from depression, but it comes out in a different way. We tend to think of depression in terms of an internalizing low self-esteem, lack of energy. But psychologists have what they call an externalized, agitated depression. So the person goes into attack mode. In other words, their quality of life and circumstances aren't good. Their needs aren't being understood and met. So you either implode or you explode. And I think that some of the agitated, angry behavior of those with classic autism is actually a reaction against their circumstances, and they go into fight mode. But it also means that those with Asperger's syndrome and some of those with classic autism can have a depression and self-hatred and then almost punish themselves for not being able to talk or not being able to, in Asperger's syndrome, make friends. So there can be a lot of self-hatred occurring as well.
Oh my, and guiding them.
Okay, Eustacia, I agree. It is trying to say to that person that you're a hero for coping the way that you do. Understand why you're like this. There's another plan, and that can be, in fact, more successful. Working on the qualities of the person in terms of personality. We will assess the person in terms of their cognitive and linguistic skills and social skills, but we also need to assess the personality. Who are they? Who would they have been if they hadn't had autism? And to go through their sense of humor, their compassion and kindness, their tolerance of sensory sensitivity. So we go through that you are a good person and you're coping with things that others may not appreciate, how challenging that is. And what I find is one of the major causes of depression in Asperger's syndrome is bullying.
What are the positives of a companion animal for somebody on the spectrum?
Do I recommend? Absolutely. Dogs are usually better at this than cats, but I'll give you an illustration. We have our, what we call moving to manhood group for young teenagers with autism. And we were going through anger management and so on. And one of the guys said, yeah, when I'm feeling angry, my cat comes up to me. She moves in and out of my legs, and that soothes and calms me. I thought that was brilliant. And often the dog will have an ability, sometimes even better than a parent and the person with autism, to sense you're losing it. And it's then going through that process. I also saw someone this week who has classic autism, no speech, 5 years old. He's a runner. He just goes, and he's lost, and they don't know where he is. And they said, should we get a dog for him? I said, yes, but also train the dog to find him. So you can start off with little games of finding the boy, so that if he does escape and runs off, you say to the dog, find him, and the dog will know where he's walked off to far better than any other person or tracker. But I would see as a companion and emotional support. And that companion accepts you. wants to be with you, is delighted with your company, and is everything that a good friend should be.
Hey! Good morning, baby girl. Oh, we love you. Oh, we love you, baby girl. You wanna go outside? You wanna go outside? Come on. Let's go. Baby, sit. Turn around. No, we're not doing belly rubs. She loves belly rubs. We're doing ear medicine, not belly rubs. We're doing ear medicine. Come on. Come on. Good girl. Okay, ready? It's gonna be cold. So dumb. I wish I could get you out of my head. 1, 2, 3, draw. Good girl. Good girl. She's so good. She's so good. Good night, Lemonade. Good night, baby. I love you. Over the last 2 weeks, Lemonade and I have surely bonded. We've become best buddies, and she knows this is her home now. I know that because when someone knocks on the door, she'll bark because she's protecting her space. And she likes to get up on the bed at nighttime with me, and she looks towards me for things. Like if one of my staff take her outside, she'll keep trying to get towards me. Like she knows that I'm her person, and she's my dog.
Video, super chill, low-key, show you how we work together as a partnership. The first thing I want to show you guys is how he puts his harness on, because yes, he does it himself. So I just pick it up, hold it like this to make sure that he can like get in the right direction, which blind girl problems. Sometimes he gets in the wrong direction and that's all my fault. We just have to redo it. But Caleb, harness, put your harness on. Boom. Look at him, isn't he a smart little boy? So, now that it's buckled under his belly, this is the typical guide dog or service dog leash. I just loop that under my pointer finger and grab the harness like this. It works, so now I'm going to say, get up, G. So as you can see, we just went from turning facing forward to turning right. Okay, now I'm going to tell him to Anava, and they know both hand gestures and words. You can use them in tandem or you can use them separately. I usually do both. So get up, Anava. That means to walk forward. So I just told him to stop, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to tell him to find the escalator. I know there's one near me, but I don't quite know where it is, so I'm going to ask him to find it for me. This is a task that not all service dogs train dogs to do. The Mirror Foundation is one that does train them on the escalator. Double. Obio. Another obio. Wow, we're literally right there. Look at that. See, now I put my hand on here and I feel what direction it's moving. So it's going upwards, which is in fact the direction I want to go, so I'm going to get on it. So what I'm going to do is he stopped at the edge. I can feel that it's the right direction. So now I'm going to grab his harness strap right like that, and I'm going to pick up his front paws and I'm going to say, Anava. So now I just stand with my foot pushed up against the stair in front of me, so I can feel when we're getting to the top, so I can pick his front paws up again and he'll jump off. Anava. There you go. Safely tackled an escalator. I'm sure you get the point now. That's how he sees obstacles that I would walk right into, and he just kind of like gets me through them and around them, and it's very helpful. So, thanks, sir. Yeah. I don't know. Ask him to find me a door. Caleb. Door. Door. Find a door. I don't know. Door.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm so blind.
Oh, no. Also bad.
It's just like, what is going on? I cannot see. Somebody needs to verbalize if they're walking through the door or not. Oh, Heidi's are so difficult to deal with sometimes. times. Now you guys just saw a real life blind girl awkward moment. But that's how I deal with them. I literally just announce it. I'm like, sorry, I'm blind. So
To imply that we might be capable of these sins criticizes not only our memory, but also our judgment, not only the library, but also the person who ordered the book. And as the writer La Rochefoucauld sardonically noted, everybody complains of his memory, but nobody of his judgment. Given the sin of bias, it is no wonder that we feel we are the same from day to day. Our brains are constantly reshaping our memories to maximize exactly that conviction. The schematic self. Psychologists have also remarked on the flexibility of individual selves, that one man in his time plays many parts. We seem to have a variety of different personae, which we adopt in different social situations. Those personae, usually referred to as roles or schemas, include not only a set of behaviors, but also the thoughts, attitudes, and feelings which go with them. Acquired by past experience in certain situations, such as talking to the boss, a schema can be triggered every time the situation recurs, acting as a shortcut which spares us the effort of working out all over again how we should behave. Human beings activate well-learned schemas without realizing. Indeed, they can find themselves disconcerted when an honest intention to break the mold, it's time to tell my boss the truth about his management skills, ends up being overridden by a schema. He's still the boss, even if I'm leaving tomorrow. Stressful situations are particularly good at evoking schemas and suppressing more thoughtful behavior. Human beings are also extremely good at compartmentalizing, keeping different schemas well apart, so that, for example, boss-related schemas do not get confused with baby-related schemas. This allows for very different sets of behavior to be performed at different times with minimum conflict. Thus, officials at the Nazi death camps were able to activate schemas concerned with duty and anti-Semitic propaganda, while watching children go to the gas chambers and then go home, activate their fond parent schemas, and cuddle their own children. It seems likely, moreover, that there are individual differences in the ability to compartmentalize. Some people can keep their schemas tightly boxed, such as the serial killer, whose neighbors say, "I can't believe it, such a nice man, wouldn't hurt a fly." Others are more fluid, their schemas less clearly distinguished from one another. If two schemas share components, as often happens, activation of one can lead to activation of another. A famous example from psychiatry is that of a woman with schizophrenia who asked to list the members of her family, came up with Father, Son, Holy Ghost. Her family schema overlapped with her Holy Trinity schema. Most of us would be able to ignore such unwanted associations, but her illness rendered her unable to do so. Sometimes, two schemas can contain incompatible beliefs. For example, if they relate to very different situations. If one is active and the other is not, the incompatibility will not be noticed. Thus, Peter may activate schemas concerned with the importance of human rights in his job as a criminal lawyer, but fail to activate them when abusing his wife at home. Unless something or someone happens to activate both schemas at the same time, Peter will never notice the hypocrisy of his behavior. Even if it is pointed out to him, he may find a way round the problem, for example by arguing that his wife has forfeited her human rights by her actions.
This is all wrong. I shouldn't be here. I was supposed to be at a United Nations conference in Chile, but now they've moved it to Madrid, overseas. And you know I refuse to fly. Well, maybe they're trying to tell you something, Greta.
How dare you?
No, how dare you, you little hypocrite. Greta is back in the news again, and she's stuck. She's stuck in the United States because the UN conference that she was supposed to be attending in Chile has been moved overseas to Spain, and because she refuses to fly, she has no way of getting over there. And if you could believe it, there are actually articles out there recommending to Greta how she can get over to Europe in time for the conference while remaining faithful to her commitment not to fly. These globalist left-wing Marxist media types actually take her seriously. So
Not only has neuroscience showed that pain, drugs, disease, and damage can affect both brains and cells, it has lengthened the list of agents far beyond these. Genes, hormones, stress, the Earth's magnetic field, temperature, sunlight, electricity pylons, radiation, the food we eat, and even the air we breathe. What vulnerable creatures we are, subject to so many outside influences. Like diamonds, our minds may shatter under the extreme pressure of brainwashing, but lesser forces fail to warp their structure. Is the critic right to cling to the assumption of solidity? At what point does tinkering at the edges become an assault on identity? To consider this question, we need to look at some intermediate examples. Feeding the brain. Recall the cell membrane. The phospholipids, of which it is made up, were for a long time of little interest to neuroscientists, who were having much more fun trying to sort out the different types of neurotransmitters and receptors by which neurons communicate. However, it now seems that phospholipids, too, are important for neuronal conversations. In particular, it matters which types of phospholipid are in the cell membrane. Some types are long and straight, and so can pack very tightly together. Others are crinkly zigzags, which can only pack loosely together. Why do we care? Because the receptors sitting in the membrane need space to express themselves. If they are restricted by tightly packed phospholipid molecules, they will have difficulty changing their positions when the neurotransmitter plugs in. This reduces the efficiency and speed with which cells generate their signals, and hence the effectiveness of the entire brain. In other words, changing the types of phospholipids can have quite an impact on how well the brain is working. What is needed is more of the crinkly phospholipids and fewer of the long, straight ones. To achieve this seems impossible if you truly believe that the brain is fixed and unchanging. In fact, it is easy. All you have to do is eat more oily fish. The lipid part of a phospholipid molecule is the straight or crinkly tail. This is made up of fatty acids, fats, which can be either saturated or unsaturated. Saturated fats, which are found in processed, long-life food, produce straight phospholipids. Unsaturated fats, which are found in oily fish, nuts, and green vegetables, produce crinkly phospholipids. The more unsaturated the fat in our diets, the less tightly packed the phospholipids in our cell membranes, so the better our cells can transmit signals. Since cell membranes suffer wear and tear like the rest of us, brains are constantly looking for new material to patch up their membranes, so changing the diet to include more unsaturated fats is an easy way to change your brain. And the change can be significant. Taking unsaturated fatty acids has been shown to benefit children with attention problems and adults with depression or schizophrenia. The high level of unsaturated fatty acids in breast milk is a major reason why breastfeeding appears to be so good for children's development. What you eat, especially when you are young, can have quite an impact on who you are in later life. Even in adulthood, eating differently can make a huge difference, as a research study by Bernard Gesh and colleagues showed. In a scenario reminiscent of A Clockwork Orange, they demonstrated that violence among convicted British criminals could be reduced by almost 40% after a few months of treatment. Burgess's protagonist underwent aversion therapy. The young men in this study simply took dietary supplements.